The SOS across the stars. The sky above Virel was not blue. It was a pale silver, as if the world itself had been drained of life. High above, the thin clouds moved too fast, pulled by strange winds, and the air smelled of smoke. The people in. The streets looked up with fear in their eyes, because they knew what was coming. For weeks, the enemy had been closing in. No one knew their true name, only the sound of their engines and the mark they left behind. Cities burned, oceans boiled, and the unlucky survivors were taken away, never to be seen again. The enemy didn't come for trade. They didn't come for peace. They came for domination. In the council chamber of Virel Prime, the leaders sat in a circle, their voices shaking. The Grand Chancellor, a tall insectoid with glassy eyes, slammed his claw on the table. "We cannot hold them off any longer," he said. "Our fleets are shattered, our shields are weak, our people are dying." The others nodded, fear heavy in the room. There was only one choice left: send the emergency distress call to the wider galaxy. The SOS beacon was old technology. It had been built thousands of years ago. In a time when the galaxy was more united, the signal would travel far, faster than light, carried on quantum threads. If there was anyone out there who could help, they would hear it, but the Chancellor knew the truth. Help never came for free. Still, the order was given. A young technician with trembling hands pressed the activation rune. A deep hum filled the air as the beacon powered up. Moments later, a pulse of energy shot into the sky, piercing through the silver clouds. It was a cry for help, raw, desperate, and without pride. For the people of Virel, all they could do now was wait. The streets fell quiet, the markets closed, and families gathered in their homes. Children asked their parents, "Who will come for us?" But no one could answer. Some prayed to the old gods, others simply stared at the horizon. They imagined sleek ships of shining steel, full of noble warriors who would protect them. They dreamed of gentle voices saying, "You are safe now," but far away on the other side of known space. The signal reached ears that were not gentle. It arrived in the territory of the Deathworlders. To most of the galaxy, that name was spoken only in whispers. Humans, they called themselves, a species born on a world where everything tried to kill them. Their animals had claws and venom. Their storms could tear mountains apart. Even their own history was full of endless wars. It was said that on their world, the weak did not survive. Only the strongest, most dangerous minds and bodies endured. The Deathworlders heard the signal, and they did not ignore it. In the war room of the dreadnought Iron Resolve, Admiral Caravance stood before a holographic map, her eyes cold and sharp, locked on the glowing point that marked Virel. "Enemy activity confirmed?" she asked, her voice low. "Yes, Admiral," replied her second-in-command. "Multiple hostile fleets in the sector. Virel's own forces are collapsing." Vance didn't smile, but there was a certain fire in her gaze. "Prepare the fleet," she said. "We'll answer their call." But the Deathworlders were not known for mercy. When they moved with overwhelming force. Within hours, massive warships assembled, ships black as the void, their hulls scarred from countless battles. The fleet engines roared like thunder as they cut through space. In their wake, they left nothing but silence. Back on Virel, the people saw something on the horizon. At first, it was only a shadow, darkening the silver sky. Then the shape grew, stretching from one edge of the horizon to the other. Gasps filled the streets. Children clung to their parents. Merchants froze where they stood. Even the soldiers lowered their weapons, unsure if this was salvation or doom. Dozens of colossal ships broke through the clouds. They did not descend gently. They came like predators, filling the air with the sound of power. The lead ship was larger than any building on the planet, its armor thick, its weapons visible even from the ground. The flag of the Deathworlders flew proudly on its side, a symbol not of peace, but of dominance. From the council tower, the Grand Chancellor watched in stunned silence. This is not the aid we imagined, he whispered, and he was right. The Deathworlders had heard the SOS, but they had come not to heal. They had come to hunt. As the first dropships began to descend, the people of Virel stood frozen. They had no idea what kind of salvation they had truly invited, for better or worse. Their fate was now tied to the most feared warriors in the galaxy, and somewhere deep inside, a truth began to take root. Mercy had not come to Virel. War had, arrival of the war fleet. The dropships tore through the clouds like burning spears. Each one left a trail of fire in the pale sky. The sound of their engines rolled over the city like distant thunder, rattling windows and shaking the streets. The people of Virel had seen ships before, but never anything like this. Soldiers from the local garrison rushed to form defensive lines, not because they planned to fight, but because they did not know what else to do. Their rifles looked small, their armor thin compared to the black, angular hulls now hovering over the capital. The air was heavy with the smell of ion fuel and hot metal. The first dropship landed in the central square. Its metal ramp hissed open, releasing a burst of white steam. Out stepped the humans, the Deathworlders. They moved with the confidence of predators, their black combat suits marked with strange emblems. Every step they took seemed to weigh more than it should, as if the ground itself feared them. Pat. The front was Admiral Kara Vance. Her armor was darker than the others. Her helmet tucked under one arm. Her eyes scanned the square, not with curiosity, but with calculation. It was as if she was already measuring the streets, the walls, and the people, deciding how best to use or defend them. The Grand Chancellor stepped forward. He forced his voice to be steady, though his claws trembled. "Honored allies," he began, "we are grateful for your swift arrival." Vance's gaze shifted to him, unreadable. "We are not allies," she said, her voice even but sharp. "We are here to end your war." Her soldiers spread through the square, setting up strange devices. Some scanned the air, others deployed portable turrets. Civilians whispered to each other, unsure if these were defenses or weapons aimed at them. The local soldiers kept their distance, watching the humans with wide, uneasy eyes, without asking permission. The humans began moving toward the spaceport. Massive hovercraft followed, carrying armored vehicles unlike anything Virel had ever seen. Their treads were lined with spikes, their cannons large enough to level entire buildings. The city streets seemed too small for them, yet they moved through with perfect precision. "Admiral," the Chancellor called after her, "you will help us, yes?" Vance stopped, turned slightly, and gave a small, cold nod. "We will help," she said, "but we don't do mercy. We do victory." Then she kept walking, leaving the Chancellor standing in the dust. From the rooftops, children watched as the Deathworlders claimed key positions across the capital. Their discipline was frightening. No wasted motion, no hesitation. It felt less like an army arriving to protect and more like an army preparing to seize. Rumors spread faster than the soldiers could move. Some said the Deathworlders had never lost a war. Others whispered that they had never left a world the same as they found it. At sunset, the full war fleet arrived in orbit. The ships blotted out the light, casting the city into long shadows. From below, the sight was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Like gods had come down from the heavens, the night sky glowed with their engines, a reminder that they were not guests, but a power far beyond anything Virel could resist. In the war room of the captured spaceport, Admiral Vance stood before a glowing tactical map. Her officers reported enemy movements, supply routes, and weak points. She listened without expression, her fingers tapping once on the table. "Deploy recon units to the outer sectors," she ordered. "I want eyes on every road, every field, every heartbeat within 50 miles. Far below, In the quiet homes of Virel's citizens, families huddled together. They whispered prayers, wondering if this was the beginning of salvation or the start of something much worse. The SOS had been answered, but the answer had teeth, and tomorrow those teeth would bite. First contact with the enemy. The first attack came at dawn. The silver sky above Virel was calm, but the ground shook with distant impacts. Birds scattered from the forests at the city's edge, their cries sharp and frantic, every person in. The capital froze when the warning sirens began to wail. On the outer walls, Virelian guards rushed to their stations. They peered through magnifiers, searching for the enemy. At first, all they saw was a low mist rolling across the far plains. Then shapes emerged, dark, insect-like machines crawling forward on 6 spiked legs. Each one carried a cannon on, its back glowing with red heat. From the command tower, Admiral Caravance watched the approach through a visor feed. Her jaw tightened. "They're testing us," she said. "Small strike force, probing our defenses," her second-in-command frowned. "Do we let them come closer?" Vance's reply was ice cold. "No, we go meet them." Within minutes, the Deathworlder dropships were airborne. They didn't move like the slow transports of Virel's fleets. They were fast, violent, cutting through the air with a roar. Beneath their wings, human soldiers clung to armored harnesses, ready to drop into combat. Each one carried weapons that hummed with restrained power from the city walls. The Virelians watched as the humans descended into the open plains. The first shots were deafening, blue streaks of plasma tearing the air. The enemy machines turned their cannons toward the new threat. For a moment, the battlefield became a storm of light, smoke and fire. The humans didn't advance in a straight line. They split into squads, moving unpredictably. Using the land for cover, Virelian military doctrine taught slow, careful defense. The humans were the opposite. They moved like predators in a hunt, fast and merciless. A machine's cannon flared. A human dove to the side, returning fire before it could recharge. The shot punched through the machine's armor, and the thing collapsed in a hiss of smoke. From the walls, alien officers shouted in disbelief. They had never seen such aggression or such precision. Even when outnumbered, the humans pushed forward, forcing the enemy to retreat step by step. It wasn't just victory, it was domination. One squad pressed too far and was surrounded by 3 enemy walkers. Instead of pulling back, the humans triggered small, disc-shaped devices and hurled them. Under the machines, the explosions were so bright that even the soldiers on the wall had to shield their eyes. When the smoke cleared, nothing but twisted metal remained. By mid-morning, the plains were littered with wreckage. The humans had lost only a handful of fighters. The enemy had lost everything they sent. But Caravance wasn't celebrating. "They were watching us," she said quietly. This was just their opening move. Back in the capital, the civilians greeted the returning human soldiers with a mix of awe and fear. Children reached out to touch the strange armor. Elders stared at the soldiers' cold eyes and wondered if such people could ever bring peace. The Chancellor approached Vance as she stepped off her dropship. "You have saved us today," he said. Vance looked at him, her tone flat. "Today," she replied, "but the war is not won, and you still have a debt to pay." That night, the wreckage of the enemy machines was dragged into the city square. Human engineers picked through the pieces, pulling out cores, weapons, and data chips. The people of Virel saw this and understood. The Deathworlders were not just defending their world. They were studying the enemy, preparing for something far larger. In the shadows beyond the walls, unseen by the patrols, a small drone hovered silently. Its red lens blinking, it turned, sped away into the mist, and vanished toward the horizon. The enemy had seen everything, and they would be back. The price of alliance, the council chamber of Virel Prime, was filled with tension. The alien leaders sat in a wide circle, their voices low and urgent. The smell of burnt metal from the morning battle still hung in the air. Through the tall windows, they could see human warships resting like dark giants above the city. Grand Chancellor Vareth clicked his claws together, a nervous habit he could not hide. "They saved our capital," he said. "But make no mistake, they now control it." A younger counselor leaned forward. "Should we not thank them? Without their soldiers, the city would have fallen." Parath's eyes narrowed. "And what do you think they will want in return?" The answer came sooner than expected. The heavy doors opened, and Admiral Caravance walked in without asking permission. Her presence filled the chamber like a sudden storm. 2 human soldiers followed her, their boots echoing against the stone floor. She stood in the center of the circle, her helmet tucked under one arm. "You called for help," she said, her voice even. "We answered." Several counselors nodded, unsure where this was going. But Vance continued, "The Deathworlders do not fight for free." Murmurs spread across the chamber. Vance ignored them, pulling a small device from her belt and placing it on the table. A holographic map appeared, not just of the city, but of the entire planet. Red lines marked resource deposits, transport routes, and military zones. "You will grant us unrestricted access to all of these," she said. "Your fuel, your metals, your food supplies." One of the elder counselors hissed in protest. "That would cripple our economy." Vance looked at him like a predator, deciding if its prey was worth the effort. "Your economy is already dead," she said. "Without us, your people will be dead too." The silence that followed was heavy. Every leader in the room felt the trap closing. If they refused, the humans could leave, and the enemy would wipe them out within weeks. If they agreed, their planet would be bound to the Deathworlders. "Will," Vareth tried to bargain. "Perhaps we can negotiate terms." Vance stepped closer, her shadow falling across him. "This is the term," she said. "Accept and live. Refuse and face your war alone." Finally, the Chancellor's shoulders slumped. "We accept," he said quietly. Vance nodded once, as if this had been the only possible outcome. Her soldiers began placing small metal beacons in the corners of the chamber. "They're for communication," she said, "and tracking." When she left, the council sat in uneasy silence. One young counselor whispered, "We traded one enemy for another." No one disagreed, but no one dared speak it aloud. Outside, the humans wasted no time. Their vehicles moved into the industrial districts, taking over factories and refineries. Civilians were told to work under human supervision. Any resistance was met with cold stares and the silent presence of armed soldiers. But as the sun set, something strange happened. Some Varelians began to feel a cautious relief. For the first time in months, the streets were patrolled, the walls reinforced, the skies guarded. It was not freedom, but it was survival. In her command tent at the spaceport, Admiral Vance studied the incoming reports. Enemy fleets were still gathering in the outer sectors. Her lips tightened. "They're coming," she murmured. "And when they do, we'll make Virel the place they regret touching." Asterisk. The turning point the attack came under a blood-red dawn. Cloud spoiled above the horizon, lit by the glow of enemy engines. The ground trembled as the first shockwaves reached the city. Virel's walls shuddered like they were made of paper. From the watchtowers, soldiers stared in disbelief. The enemy was no longer sending small raiding parties. This was a full invasion force, wave after wave of walkers, crawlers, and black-armored infantry. Above them, dark ships blotted out the rising sun, their weapons glowing like molten eyes. In the war room, Admiral Caravance stood over the tactical map. Her officers spoke quickly, their voices clipped. "Multiple breach attempts on the east and south walls," one reported. "Artillery fire incoming from the northern hills." Another added. Vance's jaw tightened. "They want the city in one day," she said. We'll make them pay for every street. Her orders came fast. Deathworlder squads deployed to the weakest sections of the wall. Heavy cannons were moved into position. Virelian troops, still uneasy under human command, found themselves handed new weapons, sleek, deadly rifles that felt heavier than anything they'd used before. At first, the Virelians hesitated. They had seen the humans fight, but never fought beside them. Then the first breach came. Enemy walkers stormed through the east gate, spitting fire and shrapnel. Virelian soldiers stumbled back, and then the humans charged past them. The Deathworlders moved like a black tide. Some dropped into cover, firing in short, precise bursts. Others rushed forward, planting explosive charges on the walkers' legs. When the blasts came, the enemy machines toppled like broken statues. The air was filled with smoke and sparks. A young Virelian sergeant, seeing the breach open again, shouted to his unit, "Hold the line." His voice carried more strength than he felt. The humans glanced at him, and one gave a sharp nod. Together, alien and human soldiers pushed forward, forcing the enemy back step by step. In the southern streets, the fighting was even worse. Buildings collapsed under heavy fire, sending clouds of dust into the air. Civilians ran for the shelters, while human medics pulled the injured from the rubble. There was no time for thanks. The enemy was relentless. From above, Deathworlder gunships swept in, their cannons tearing holes in enemy formations. The sound was deafening, like the sky itself was ripping apart. Every strike made the ground shake, but it also bought the defenders precious moments. By midday, the streets were littered with wreckage, both machine and flesh. The Virelians had fought harder than they ever had before, and for the first time, they saw the humans not as conquerors, but as shields. One Virelian captain, panting and covered in soot, looked at the human beside him. "You fight like the world is ending," he said. The human replied without looking away from his sights. "For us, it always is." The turning point came in the late afternoon. The enemy's main command walker, a towering machine bristling with weapons, lumbered toward the city square. Its cannons roared, blasting holes in the outer defenses. Vance herself led the assault. Her squad weaved between streets, using the ruins as cover. Explosives were planted on its legs, its joints, its core. When the charges detonated, the blast could be heard across the capital. The machine toppled, fire spilling from its wreckage, and the enemy lines began to falter. By nightfall, the invaders were in retreat. The defenders stood bloodied, exhausted, but alive. In the city square, humans and Virelians leaned on their weapons, staring at each other in the flicker of burning wreckage. Something had shifted. Not trust, not yet, but a shared understanding. They were in this together now, and together they might just survive. The enemy breaks. The morning after the battle, the sky above Virel was strangely clear. The silver clouds had drifted away, leaving the stars sharp and cold. From the city walls, the wreckage of the enemy still smoldered. But the humans were not celebrating. Admiral Cara Vance stood on the deck of the Iron Resolve. Her eyes scanned the fleet status reports, scrolling in the air before her. Every ship was ready, every gun was loaded. This was no longer a defense. This was the hunt. Her voice carried across the command deck. "Set course for the enemy's forward base," she said. The crew moved without hesitation. Outside the viewport, the fleet began to rise from Virel's orbit. The dark holes reflected no light, as if the stars themselves bent away from them. From the ground, the people of Virel watched their protectors leave. Some felt relief, others annoying fear. The humans had promised victory, but no one had asked what that victory would cost. In deep space, the Deathworlder fleet moved like a predator through the void. No wasted movement, no signals sent, only the faint hum of engines designed for war. Scouts led the way, slipping through asteroid, fields and nebula clouds. Every enemy position they found was marked and silently erased. The first strike on the enemy base came without warning. Human warships erupted from the blackness, like shadows turned solid. Missiles and railgun slugs rained down on the fortress below. Enemy ships scrambled to respond, but they were too slow. Deathworlders didn't fight fair. They fought to end the fight before it could begin. On the ground, enemy soldiers poured from their bunkers. They had faced many opponents in their conquests, but never humans. The Deathworlder troops hit them like a storm. Their armor turned aside small arms fire. Their weapons cut through enemy shields as if they were mist. In the chaos, Virelian soldiers, now wearing mismatched human combat gear, fought alongside their new allies. They were slower, less precise, but they had learned from the humans. They no longer hesitated to strike. Every step forward was taken in blood. By the third day, the enemy base was nothing but broken towers and burning craters. Captured soldiers knelt in the dust, staring at the black flags of the Deathworlders. Admiral Vance walked through the ruins. Her boots crunched on shattered armor. She paused before the enemy commander, a towering figure with eyes full of hate. "This is the mercy you wanted?" The alien spat. Vance leaned close, her voice low. "No," she said. "This is the warning." The message spread faster than the fleet could travel. Across the galaxy, in markets, in spaceports, in hidden pirate dens, the story was told. The Deathworlders had taken an enemy stronghold and left nothing standing. Some whispered they were saviors. Others swore they were conquerors wearing the mask of rescue. On Virel, the people listened to the broadcasts and realized something unsettling. Their war was no longer about survival. It was about serving in a much larger campaign. And the Deathworlders were not stopping here. Asterisk. A new banner the war on Virel ended not with a single battle, but with silence. The enemy fleets were gone, their bases reduced to ruins. No more alarms, no more burning skies, but the peace felt heavy, as if it belonged to someone else. In the Capitol Square, the Grand Chancellor stood before the crowd. He wore the ceremonial colors of his office. Though his eyes seemed older now, around him, human soldiers stood like dark statues. The people waited for words of celebration. Instead, they heard the sound of engines above. The iron resolve descended through the clouds. Its massive shadow fell over the entire square. A ramp lowered, and Admiral Cara Vance walked forward with a small escort. She did not bow. She did not smile. Instead, she carried a folded piece of cloth, black, marked with a silver emblem, the crest of the Deathworlders. The Chancellor stepped toward her, his voice careful. "Our world is safe," he said, "because of you." Vance's eyes didn't soften. "Your world is safe," she replied, "because it is now under our protection." The words struck the crowd like a sudden wind. Some cheered, thinking it meant lasting safety. Others fell silent, realizing the truth. Protection was another word for control. Vance unfolded the banner and handed it to the Chancellor. "Raise it above your council hall," she said. "Let every ship that comes here know this is Deathworlder space." There was no choice. The Chancellor took the banner, his claws gripping the heavy fabric. From the top of the hall, the black flag. Unfurled, it caught the wind, its silver emblem shining against the pale sky. Life slowly began to rebuild. Humans trained Virelian soldiers in their methods. Factories worked day and night to produce supplies, not just for Virel, but for the Deathworlder fleet. Children learned new history lessons. They spoke of the day the SOS was answered, and how the black ships came through the clouds. In the quiet of his chambers, the Chancellor looked out at the city. The streets were busy, the walls stronger, the skies guarded, and yet he could not shake the feeling that Virel was no longer truly theirs. They had traded one kind of war for another, the slow, invisible war of belonging to someone else. Far above, the iron resolve prepared for departure. Vance stood on the bridge, her gaze fixed on the stars ahead. "Next system?" her officer asked. She gave a small nod. "There's always another signal," she said, "and we always answer." As the fleet rose into the cold dark, the people below watched the engines flare, some with pride, some with fear, but all of them knew one thing. They were Deathworlders now, whether they wanted to be or not. Asterisk.